On education. The preparation of a viable workforce starts in the schools. Right now, accountability in the public schools is split between the superintendent and a network leader. Some have argued that this leads to a lack of responsibility in the system. What would you do to ensure clear supervisory accountability in the public schools? And we're going to start with Mr. Sweeney.
In our public schools, we have somewhat, in my perspective, is the disconnect. We need to come up with a community mandate, a plan that works for the children. When you talk about schools that are failing, when you talk about when the students are not achieving what they can achieve, we have to figure out a way to solve that problem. I stated at another debate that I'm not an educator. But I've ran across a whole lot of educators in this district. And when you take these schools and you bust charter schools into our schools and you do all of these things and our schools are failing, we need to come up with a district plan. For someone like me that doesn't have all the answers when it comes down to education, I'm quite sure in our district that we can come up and get together and come up with a plan that will work, that will change, whether the teachers have a discrepancy with the principal, vice versa, how the money is being spent. Today I went to pick up these little items and I see nothing but teachers. They have a small little budget to buy little things for their classrooms. That has to be increased. So when it comes down to the schools, we need a plan, a new approach on all levels: behavior, buses, training, custodians, opening up the buildings, everything that can make things better. Like I said, I'm not an educator, but I definitely know that I have the ear to listen and to follow what the suggestions that I get, things that will make it better. And I really didn't understand your question, but I'm not kidding.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Mr. Ford?
So Michael Bloomberg has taken the occasion of mayoral control to institute a free market philosophical approach to education. It's about a school adopting a business model and cranking out a product at the end of the day. And that product is supposed to be an educated child. But what he fails to realize is that our children are not on an assembly line and they're not products. They are individuals. And educational philosophy is about empowering individuals to know how to learn, to critically think, and to problem solve. And that has been removed from our educational curriculum. We are now teaching to tests. We are now forcing schools to compete with one another for resources. We are forcing schools to compete with one another for children. And so we have to remove this paradigm and change this paradigm. Many believe we need to eliminate mayoral control. I believe that once we have a mayor that is not driven by revenues and numbers, one who is focused on our children, we can use mayoral control to our advantage. We can further empower parents, including them in the process, how resources are allocated, how resources are expended on behalf of our students. We have a mayor that's hell-bent on contracting public capacity when we need to be expanding public capacity. We have 1.1 million students in New York City public schools, yet still we are creating smaller schools with larger and larger administrations. So where a classroom used to educate a child, it is now housing an assistant principal as their office. So we are contracting our public capacity when we need to be expanding our public capacity. We have an administration that has pit parent against parent, traditional public school parent versus charter school parent. We have decided that it's appropriate to co-locate quasi-private schools, private charter schools, in public school facilities, taking away from very successful public school programs the resources and the facilities that they need. PS 138 right here in this district has received, according to the DOE, a letter A grade for 5 out of the last 6 years, and they were rewarded by being co-located with a charter school. We need to take the things that work, PS 138, and some of our other successful schools, and model them and use them as a best practices example and export them to our more troubled schools, and not just in a random haphazard way, just close schools down and replace them with larger bureaucracies. That's not how we fix our education system. We need to zero in on classroom and students and not on administration and regulation.
Thank you, Mr. Foy. Mr. Corning?
So I always feel uniquely qualified when it comes time to answer questions about education, because of being a parent of 6 and having a child in every facet of the Department of Education has given me tremendous insight into what's going on. But for this particular question, which I believed, how would I work or change the supervisory capacity? I believe that that's going to start with the mayor and chancellor, who have to be not in the moniker of students first, but really have to be about students first. We need a chancellor who's an educator, who understands what it takes to make a building run. And we have to allow principals the oversight for budgetary things. So I've talked to several principals who would have loved to have the opportunity to do a competitive bid, and they're overpaying for supplies because they have to buy them from certain vendors, and it really cuts down on their ability to make a decision that's in the best interest of the building that they serve. So I think that the principals are demanding an opportunity to have oversight over their budgets as it relates to competitive bidding. The principals that I've spoken to on a daily basis say to me that, Rob, if we could choose who to buy from, if we could go online and go to overstock.com and purchase, we'd be able to make our money go way further than vendors being selected by the Department of Education and us having to use those vendors who are usually at an accelerated price. So I believe that we have to give our principals the opportunity to be a part of the budgetary process as it relates to supplies. And once we do that, I think we'll see a change in the equipment that's used, and I think we'll see less abuses of the money that taxpayers spend once that happens. So I believe that there has to be more power delineated to our principals, who are the ones on the ground, who are the facilities operators, who should be responsible for making purchases that are conducive to the demographics that they're serving, because they're different throughout the city.
Thank you, Mr. Cornegie. Reverend Tiller.
Well, I got some good news today. I was endorsed by CSA, and that's the Union of Principals and Supervisors. I was very happy to receive that notification from Ernie Logan. And it's because I work very closely with the principals in our area. I've had the opportunity to be there and to sit in the conference room with Mr. Gassaway and Mr. Muhammad. So I know a great deal of what their frustration is. Listen, the buck has to stop with the chancellor. The buck has to stop with the superintendents. The buck has to stop with the principals, the teachers, and most of all, the buck has to stop with the parents. We're going to create an educated workforce, a workforce that's capable of being employed, then we're going to have a serious, honest conversation. There's a lot of money in New York schools, a lot of money in construction, a lot of money in supplies, but we're not talking about the children. I'm proud of the fact that I grew up in the South, and some of the school buildings were not the greatest. There were not state-of-the-art facilities. There weren't smart boards. But I learned that you can have actually a great school with the dirt as the floor and the sky as the ceiling. If you have two things, you have parents, number one, that will instill the value of education in their child, so that child shows up in school ready to learn, and you have teachers who believe they can learn. We can educate our children. One of the greatest initiatives, one of the greatest inventions in America was the idea of compulsory education. We used to believe that we could educate every child. I'm disturbed, and I think that our entire educational philosophy is wrong-headed from the federal government on down. We have talked about smaller schools. We have talked about the privatization of schools. Charter schools are not completely bad, and let's face it, a lot of desperate